You improvise. Okay, let's see how time is. But at least think about 3 to 5. Is that good? Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's it. Close and not farther. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Can you go from the first? First. Yeah, it's good. You want to
But then, should I bring it down a little bit then, the projector?
It's fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's good. That's perfect.
It's okay to live stream. It's okay to live stream?
Yes, it is.
Is it okay?
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. All right, you can start. To the skies I rise, to the earth I bow, to the ground I touch, and then you choose one. In God I rest. To the skies I rise, to the earth I bow, to the ground I touch, the earth I trust. To the skies I rise, to the earth I bow, to the ground I touch, in God I rest. Just you now, let me hear you. To the skies, yeah. Let's hum. In earth I rest. Thank you. Let's give a hand to our brother here who's doing it, Larry. Thank you, my brother. So appreciate you. Thank you. So grateful you're all here today, and you took that time aside. It's not lost on me that the fact that where we find ourselves now in this current situations that we are living and we are still together is close to a miracle. So I'm grateful that we can share this space and breathe with one another. And as we know well, we are heading through a very clear, planned chaos. And more than ever, we need each other. There's no other place I would rather be than here at Union, because I know that I can sustain you and you can sustain me. And we catch each other when we fall. And then we can keep on the struggle. So our differences must be worked out so that we can become this strong, plural, univocal voice during this time. Because if we break, we cannot work together. And if we cannot work through and beyond our differences, they have won. And us in our communities might run the risk of disappearing as well. So, what I want to do today is to show you two projects that I have, that I'm currently developing, that I love to have your ideas, reactions, reflections, criticisms, attacks, assaults, everything you have during this time. So all my books are deeply tied to the breathe I'm breathing at that moment that I'm writing. It's a way to capture the pulse of the world and see how this goes in rhythm or in sync with my own heart, or how to orient myself during this time. So my process is more, I feel, guided more by intuition than expertise, which I am very limited in. But when I write, I try to make sense of myself and the world we are living in, and try to make sense of it all. And that's why it's so hard to make sense that writing is endless, or the speaking is endless, or the teaching is endless. As I do this, I change, so change my work. And this shift reflects in my scholarship and the immense transformations that I must go through. So I always think that my books can really change things, but at the same time I know that very little will come out of it. So I write with my heart, not in my chest, but on the ground. Just like Plenty Coups, the chief of the crows, when colonization came, he said, when the buffalo went away, there was no more singing, and my heart fell to the ground. Of course, I'm not trying to compare anything to that, but there's something about our hearts falling to the ground that we have to learn with other people how to do this. So, two projects to deal with this fascism that we are going through. So the first one is a possible title. It's about a gesture, a liturgical gesture, a ritual. Rise, bow, and prostrate. Spiritual practice to survive the end of the world. 3 ways of being in the world. Or this one is better. 3 ways to change the world: to punch, kick, and dismantle fascism in the alt-right movement. But I don't know if anybody will be interested in that. So there are chapters to, and this is based on what we just sang, right? So there will be, oh no, it's all good, my brother. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the chapters are why a gesture. Those are the small chapters. It will be about 30,000 words at the most. I don't want to make it big. And this is all that matters. Explains how to do the 3 gestures: to rise, to bow, and to touch the ground, which is a way of connecting with everything around us. Right? When you look to the skies, we can use. You can get the sounds when I look up to the mountain where my help comes from. Right? And then we can connect with the wind, with the clouds, with the critical zone that maintains us all breathing. With the trees, with the birds, and then we go down and we bow. When we bow, we are bowing both to everyone around me, both human species, plant species, animal species, rocks, and everything. That I bow in both ways, both to honor their lives. I bow to you to honor your life, but also I bow to those who have already gone, knowing that I have to, as I learned with this knowledge from the African indigenous people there in Brazil, to walk softly everywhere you go. Because there have been so many people before us here. So many species, so many animals, so many beings before us right in this place. So we need to walk softly on earth. So And the ground is to touch the ground, is to remember where we come from. We are mud people, and so to the mud we will become. So how do we connect to that enormous length of time? So then we connect the skies with the earth and everything around. So it's a way of connecting. The first living being to die with the arrival of the colonizers in Latin America, especially in Brazil, was a tree. When the Portuguese arrived in 1500, the first thing they did was to cut a tree to make a cross to celebrate a mass. This first gesture performed in the New World at the very beginning of colonization was in fact a liturgical ritual, one that pronounced the killing of 56 million indigenous people and the devastation of the land. The liturgical gesture has taken on a vast number of different ways that modernity has and still colonize us, kill us, and devastate us. So this liturgical ritual is a way of offering something else rather than that gesture, is to do these three gestures as a way to counter symbolically and hopefully concretely this ongoing colonial capitalist fascist project of death and horror. This gesture is very simple. It wants to offer a way to reimagine our ways of living, who we are related to, what is it that correlates us and makes us live the way we are living. So from a colonial act, we transition into other ways of caring for the earth and caring for each other in ways that we have been prevented from, and find other ways of relation. So we are living through a combination of so many crises, or everything is in crisis in our world, right? There's the social crisis, the political crisis, the ecological crisis, the epistemological crisis, the educational crisis, the economic crisis, the moral crisis, and so on and so forth. So all of that I'm calling just a spiritual crisis, because everything is crumbling apart. And only a spiritual offering can actually respond to all those crises. So this time that we are living in this absurdity and sadness, in this machine of sadness, there's something to be said about a gesture that can keep us going. So there's two ways of doing of this gesture. One is inward, because we need to work with ourselves, because I believe we are all possessed by the legion of demons of capitalism. We're literally possessed. It lives in our bodies. It makes us think in a certain way, feel in a certain way, and act in a certain way. All of us, institutions and individuals, we all need to cast this demon away from ourselves. So this pervasive force drives our obsession with money. It is the demon that makes us orbit around the capital and hoarding everything, makes us objectify the earth, keeps us away from the fundamental connection with the land. That's why the land is never in our conversation. The land is always a sidekick for most of our conversation, most of our scholarship, because the spirit of coloniality has ripped us apart from the land, and has done that with the African people, has done with indigenous people, has done with all of us. We all live as if we have never landed. So that spirit of capitalism must be changed, transformed for another spirit, the spirits of the land, the Holy Spirit, something else that will give us a different way of being in the world. And there is also the outward gesture of this liturgical movement, because it hopes to create connections with people and the land, organize, put together distinct groups to create from new gardening communas to new groups that protect rivers and go and destroy industries of pollution. Using two groups so precious here at our school, it is as if the Kairos movement and the Center for Earth Ethics are doing the same thing together. So these are the three things that I believe that ritual can help us. First, ritual as medicine, mutual sustenance, creating deeper connections with the land and each other. Rituals in this book intend to create deeper correlations with our landscape so that we can finally see ourselves as part of a landscape and speak from it. It hopes to create awareness of all other beings around us, including the human species, but all of the tree species, the plant species, the river species, the bird species, the animal species. It is at the core of the work at Union so that we could see, for instance, the Hudson River, or the birds around us, or the plants around us as fundamental citizens of our own campus. Ritual as mode, then, of fugitive forms of being, learning how to live in the midst of a fascist time. Perhaps this might not be the time to confront the fascist government with physical actions, perhaps, we don't know. Because they can only breathe with the use and abuse of police, weapons, armaments, and machinery of death. Perhaps if we start with rituals, we can foster ways of expansion and transformation by caring for our gardens. If our utopia is both about a new world where everybody will be treated in a careful way, but also the utopia of our little gardens, that we can care for each other, support our local farmers, care for our rivers, and they are in our conversation. Why we do that? Perhaps, and only perhaps, this book is about a perhaps. We can brood other forms of actions that set ambushes to such vile regimes. And the last rituals as molecular revolutions, inventing forms of resistance and transformation. This is taken from the French philosopher Félix Guattari, that he says that micropolitics and molecular revolutions are ways to enact changes that we need. Molecular revolution, he says, is a double movement, breaking both capitalism and our ways of living, working on the correlation between social and subjective transformation. So at the bottom of it, the idea is simple. If I can correlate with the birds, the trees, and the rivers about me in a daily ritual, that I can expand my whole notion of self, that myself is not a discrete form of individual, but a collective of many subjectivities, then perhaps it can make me more aware and more prone to engage groups of protections of birds, trees, and rivers near my house. And then we will see that we'll perhaps be able to see that the enemy is not each other, it's not the immigrants, it's not the transgender people, but rather a capitalist system that is killing us all. As Guattari says in the Lines of Flight, a new type of struggle is trying to find its feet, less as a model than as a demonstrable precedent that another field of possibility is well and truly open. Rituals are in this way a precedent for another field of possibility, a field to be open. Concluding this book, then, like all of my books are dreams, right? It's an exaggeration of possibilities that perhaps if we push way away, we might get closer to something. It is about wondering of might be possible, an illusion of a possibility, a precedent of what could be coming. So many of my students have already done this gesture in class, and they might be able to say something about it. So that's the first book. Let's sing again the song. To the skies I rise, to the earth I bow, to the ground I touch, and the earth I trust. Thank you, my brothers, thank you. Moves I All right. So my friends, the second book is called Through the Night. Living on the Saturday of Despair. And so I'm very grateful to Professor Brigitte Cole, Jeremy Hutton, Greg Snyder, Professor Serene Jones, who have helped me in so many ways already. So this is an existential, theological, liturgical deep dive into Christian High Holy Feast of Holy Week, or more precisely, on the long lingering around this day of Saturday. This book is it's in the first days of conception, so it needs help. At the heart of this book lies the assurance that the world won't become better. On the contrary, it will become worse by the day. And there's very little evidence that something will change or turn things around, even though it might happen. But this assertion of our time does not mean that we have to give up on the world, on life, on what we do. On the contrary, to linger on the Saturday of despair is to become aware of the fullness of what our time holds, with all the tragedies, losses, death, and abandonment, so that we can somehow find a way to live through. We are not the first ones to leave these unprecedented times. We can say so many people, right? We can talk about the African Americans here, right? We can talk about the indigenous people here. Professor West did this talk about jazz and how jazz was a way of surviving that long Saturday of despair and the blues. So what I want to do is to go into that moment in the lives of the disciples where we barely know about it and not much has been written, which is the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. There are very names given to it: Holy Saturday, Great Saturday, Low Saturday, Saturday of Glory, Black Saturday, Easter Eve. In Brazil we call it Hallelujah Saturday. Each name of Saturday alludes to a certain theological, anthropological meaning. Saturday has been spiritualized, glorified, embellished, forgotten, or served only as a bridge from Good Friday to Holy Sunday, which is what matters to the heart of Christianity. However, Saturday, as many people on the margins know, seems to be this wonderful time, or the worst time for discovery, to reinterpret the ways in which we are living. So it seems to me that we are all getting into this Saturday, a time of war, growing fascism, climate catastrophes, poverty grows, anxiety, despair, and absurdity. The biblical narrative does not say much about what happened after Jesus died. It seems that the disciples are scattered in fear of capture. About them we only infer that John, the beloved disciple, took care of Jesus' mother. We know that Peter had denied Jesus before his death. But besides Peter and John, we don't know what happens to them. So we can imagine, without risking much of a stretch of imagination, that they were lost and afraid. Their world was shattered, and they had to now live with this huge emptiness, perhaps holding a sense of despair. Everything they had seen, heard, experienced, and hoped was crushed in that cross. Their master was mercilessly killed, and so they were left with the immediacy of the Saturday. So what you know about the Saturday is that Jesus descended into hell, and as part of the harrowing of hell. But according to Mark 15:25, Jesus was crucified on the 3rd hour, which means the 9 a.m., and died on the 9th hour, which means 3 p.m. And then the Gospel of Mark 16:12 says that when Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And the very early of the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb around 6 a.m., I'm guessing. So if I frame Saturday this way, I will start on Friday at the time Jesus died at 3 p.m. and we'll close on Sunday when the woman went to the tomb at 6 a.m. This framing will be 40 hours. Shaping Saturday not as an actual 24-hour day, but rather a Saturday framed by the hours of affliction, of feeling lost. Perhaps the longest Saturday that we might have heard in terms of a day. But based on that, I will create like a book of hours, narrating these 40 hours one at a time in sequence, highlighting every hour with some imaginative ponderings on what the disciples might have lived, mirroring their lives with the lives that we are living now, with the despair that we are living now. At each hour, I'll bring communities from many places to also witness to the Saturdays of so many people around the world. So the reason to ponder on the Saturday of despair is to give voice to how we are living our world today, feeling increasingly lost at the end of our ropes and in an endless Saturday. The book will not offer clear ways to arrive on Sunday, or provide a path towards Easter Sunday, or offer any possibility of clear redemption. Instead, we will linger in the vastness of loss on Saturday as it feels we are living now. By lingering there, without hope, we might be able to see what is in there for us that will set us free. While we linger in despair, not knowing what to do, we might see little movements of possibilities of a little perhaps or yes in the midst of so many no's. While the disciples were living this most terrifying Saturday, something was happening in them, brewing those hours, a certain paradox of life and death, a mixture of both, where something non-existent was in fact there, but latent, outside of the disciples' immediate awareness. Yes, there was a latent form of life that proved to become a vortex of power that ended creating a movement that we all know. So this Saturday is about a certain kind of magical thinking, so to speak. As on John Didion's book, A Year of Magical Thinking, she believed that her dead husband would return at any time. That belief was like our Saturday, a holding place where we have to come to grips with the fact that that miracle we want won't happen. But something else will, if we get past that first fantasy, that first desperation to find meaning. So from at least the 2nd century on, Christians have thought imaginatively about what transpired on Saturday, about what the silent absence of Christ from the world meant. So I want to continue this tradition. And Saturday might as well be a requiem for many of us and many of other species. Easy hope can be much more deadly than despair sometimes. But in every requiem, there is a call to live, a demand to get up in arms and fight what is killing us. But we don't know what is coming. Perhaps Franz Kafka might be right when he said, there is always hope, but not for us. This is it, my friends. And now I want your comments about this. Thank you. Thank you. We don't need to say anything, it's all good. I know I've been speaking too fast, I know, to process it all. We can sing and then go. Oh, and we're going to have, there's playing for us before.
It's not really a question, it's more a comment. I really appreciate the focus on Saturday in a different way. I was just talking, I'm writing a thesis on complex trauma, and I was just thinking about the narrative in Mark and how we don't actually get to the resurrection, right? Like, not really. And for me, when I'm thinking about complex trauma, I mean, this is where complex trauma survivors live, is in holy. They never get to resurrection. And so when I think about what you're writing about, those are the people that come to mind for me. And so I'm really moved that you're focusing on that.
Thank you so much for your scholarship. I've got a question or an attention to the inward and outward. And I'm thinking a lot about kind of Ignatian spirituality and how the outward is a reflection of the internal. And so I'm wondering, could the same gesture from a different place have a different result? And what informed your inward when you think about that?
One of the things that I ask students to do is to do it in different places. If you do it in different places, that's, I think, what we need. The place has to affect us in a way that our thought will be transformed. So that's why I think that this only theology is possible if done locally, just right here. Then it can become universal. But it has to start right here. I mean, whatever destroyed flower I have in front of me, a polluted river, or people in jail, or whatever is around me, that will affect my gesturing, my words, my feelings, and how I feel. But it's very tricky too because, for instance, I am very much oriented by the moon. So today is the lunar moon. That's why I came in red to honor the moon. But now there's something came out saying that the moon is an endangered place as well because of what we are doing. For the first time, I think I felt like the indigenous people. For them, when you take the mountain, you take the entire life, right? And so connecting that with the moon for me was just like, what's going to happen to me if the moon is going to be destroyed somewhere? So what does it do to my theology, to my walking, to my living, to my thinking, to my spirituality, if the moon is not there anymore?
Thank you.
My dear brother, that was magnificent. And I think your life and witness is an existential refutation of Kafka. Kafka's wrong. Profound, but thoroughly wrong. Now, you remember he says in this journal, there's only one person that recognizes me. His name is Kierkegaard. What does he mean by that? The very fact that the joy and the love in your intellect, body, mind, spirit lives the question. It's not a theoretical response to the question, but it's real, Kay. It lives the question. And that living and witness is enough to resist the conclusion of Kafka, even though the challenge of Kafka is forever in our closets. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that Franz Kafka is right. There's joy, there's love, there's hope in any situation because there's a history that's already been put in you through a sacrament, through a ritual, through a witness, through a memory, through a love, through a connection of those who came before. And Kafka himself doesn't lend himself to that history. And we see it in you, every word. Every word. It's like the Bel Shem Tov, just overflowing with this joy and love and intellect and witness. And in that sense, Kafka's a very important interlocutor. But as I said, just wrong as two left shoes.
Right on, my brother, right on. I think that's why, I mean, this is not a project on nihilism or a way of it's not a way of giving up. I think it's the very opposite. There is a true belief on this. I do believe there is a latent possibility, which is the joy, which is the struggle, which is the living. That is kind of the undercurrent of this project. I just want to press more towards that so that this, instead, perhaps my fear is that the despair of our times can take us down. Perhaps if we make friends with it, then we can find a way around and say, no, there is this undercurrent of joy. It's what Jesus said to the disciples, I come here so that, I don't know exactly, but so my joy in you will be complete. And Bonhoeffer will say something beautiful about that. He said, the joy of God was not, was not taken away in the misery of the manger of Jesus. Neither was it destroyed in the cross. So that is like an everlasting joy. This is undercurrent. I think this book is about finding what is the undercurrent that kept the indigenous people to live after 500 years, that kept the African American community living after all these years of slavery and disaster. So it's a way of finding, that's why the inward and outward, it's a way of going into that undercurrent that will keep us. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Here and there. There. Yeah, go ahead.
I think what I was going to ask or say has kind of already been touched upon, but I was just wondering how you tie in maybe like what we would say is like the Christian Sabbath experience of despair versus like, maybe a Jewish one that's more celebratory and joyful, and how they both are kind of grounded maybe in this rest?
I think there's both in the Jewish tradition, right? That it can go either from the despair and also from the trust. I think this is the movement of, it's not a linear movement, but it's a way of going here, going there, being hit by something and thrown there. And I think in that way we can go to the Psalms and say, God, you are my light and my Savior. But we can also say, where have you been, or you have abandoned me. So I think it's both movement that has to be there.
This is more a comment, but what's coming up for me as I was thinking about the living in the despair, Saturday of despair, and how putting my psychotherapist hat on, many times with clients that are really depressed. When I was early in my career, I would try to tell them, I feel so bad, I feel so sad. I'm like, oh, you're great, you're wonderful. And that made them feel worse because I have all these things I should feel good, I should feel. But then I had to learn to be able to sit in the muck and the mire with them. And I began to just mirror back, wow, you really feel bad, you really feel sad. And when I did that, they auto-corrected. They began to find the joy and the peace and the happiness because they had someone to sit down in that place with them. Right. And so I believe that even this work could offer that.
Beautiful. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. I think for me, the question, I think there's, in the U.S. culture, there is this need to respond to someone in desperation. Will you be okay? All is fine. I think it's as a kind of an anxiety response that wants to get to something we don't know what to do. Perhaps just to get past beyond that and say, what kind of joy and happiness we're talking here? The one that comes out of anxiety, that is fear, that don't know what to do with, or the one that goes through the valley of death, but then see that the cup is pouring. So there is an undercurrent that keeps something alive there. Thank you. And then there.
Well, thank you so much. I found that very moving and quite brilliant, as I often do with your work. And I want to say that, first of all, I'm at the Center for Earth Ethics, as well as really happy to be teaching alongside members of the faculty in Union. But I often, in my work that's outward-facing, reference you and your work and what you're doing. And I think it is absolutely cutting edge and the exact creative energy that is needed. And I want to thank you for that, for doing that work here, and to acknowledge that it has all dimensions of challenges to it that you're meeting so gracefully with humor, which we also love and need. As well as so many other gifts that you have. So I want to go back. I think the way that you said it in the beginning was really beautiful, about how we have, so many of us have been taught not to land here, that colonization, and particularly the way that it's partnered with capitalism, has really, really trained our minds and hearts to not relate to the land, make relationships, to acknowledge, to be present in that way. And the way that you explained ritual and ceremony in the beginning as a channel of doing that is beautiful. I also, something stood out to me when you said about the people coming and the first thing cutting a tree to build a cross. It's really incredible to ponder that. So my question to you is about the ritual and ceremony work that you do. And I know, because I've heard you say that you've taken that very seriously, about how to do that within the tradition that we have here, that you have, and that but making those relations to land, to nature. The beautiful way that you're doing it, you're just doing it practically, having us do this thing, this beautiful song, and all of the gestures. I love it. I'm wondering, when you do that with students, if you could explain a little bit about those experiences and whether or not what you get, what you receive from the natural beings and entities that you're creating a space to relate to feels like despair? Does it feel like something else? Is that something that we can learn from when we think about this what you've put before us about the Saturday of Despair? I'm curious to know more.
Thank you, Karen, thank you. And Karen wrote the introduction to my previous book, and it's the best thing about the book. Read that introduction, and then you can throw the book away. But thank you. It's fascinating because I've been doing that for a while now, and some of the students are here who did that, and I get all kinds of response. It's fascinating. It's what I said. Some who live more on their minds hate that because it's the body and it's awkward, and there's always this anger at the beginning. But it's interesting how it lingers through the semester, because I asked them to do it every day. So at the end, there's something that happens, a little something. And I believe that those small sparks are the possibility of what I said about this opening. That now, if they're walking and the tree was never a thing, all of a sudden, a tree might become a presence. And I believe in these small gestures, because what I've seen in my life when I start to do this, it starts to open up in a way that never ends now. And I just started pay attention, bow to a tree or listening. I remember with my son Ike, I did this thing with him. I walked with him and said, Ike, let's stop. Can you hear it? And he said, what? Let's hear it. He said, what? We're going to the bus stops. What, Dad, what's that? And my two daughters were there too. And they said, the birds are singing. And they go, oh, yeah, okay. And so after a while, something happened to them. I think about a month later, we were going to the bus stop, and it was just me and Ike. And Ike said, Dad, stop. I said, what? Can you hear it? I said, what? Can you hear it? I said, Ike, let's go. You need to go you're going to lose the bus. No, stop. Ike, what's that? The birds. I think it's this just, if we start, that's all I want. And I've seen in every single student, perhaps I would say 99%, something like that happens. And for me, if that is continuous, it is a no return. Because now everything I do, I cannot pass by an animal that is dead that I do not need to do a funeral. So it's this thing that grows. And I just believe in those small sparks of transformation. Thank you, Corinne. Thank you.
Thank you for the beauty of your mind at work here today. Really appreciated witnessing that. My question is probably less about the intentions of your project and the second one particularly, and maybe more about some of the implications it could raise for examining how some Christian traditions, maybe a majority of Christian traditions, have even flattened the meaning of resurrection in some ways. Because when I think about those initial experiences with resurrection, I'm not quite sure it's what the disciples and the community actually wanted, right? Jesus is alive again, but deeply wounded in his flesh. They can actually touch flesh wounds. There's doubt as they're experiencing him, and then they lose him again. I imagine that people who love Jesus probably wanted him to stick around, stay, be himself, but maybe it raises the implication for me. The implication for me is maybe resurrection isn't everything we want it to be either. No, we don't want to stay in despair, but what if resurrection, as we think about it, is a fantasy that is never what we want it to be, because it also comes with woundedness. It also comes with intermittence. It also comes with something that you can't keep and you can't hold on to. Just wonder if we need to reinterpret resurrection as a people.
I love what you're saying, and see, I learned with Yvonne Jabara not to think some of the major Christian themes in the daily life of people, like how salvation for the poor women in the northeast of Brazil was a new dress or a little radio, something tangible that would change their lives. And when you're saying that, that reminded me of of a black church that I went to the south side of Chicago, and I lived there for 2 years. I went to this church, and there was this one person. He was the head of the choir, and he would come from the Magnificent Mile to the south side, and he had his stripped shirt that they have to have a name because they're so nobody that they have to put a name on them. Like every cleaner, everybody who's doing the groundwork had to do that. And he would come always like halfway of the service. And when he comes right in and he rushes into the choir. And when he starts singing, for me, that is resurrection. It's like it's a world that said to him, you are nobody. But when you come to church and you're singing with your people, you are somebody. That for me was resurrection. That was literally Sunday resurrection for me every Sunday. So that's what I'm trying to see more in the sense of what is it that we can do each other to resurrect each other every day, every moment, sustain ourselves, more than more metaphysical sense of the resurrection. So friends, the last thing, we need to go. Go quick, my brother. Go ahead.
I was super inspired by everything you said and everything that you've shared. One thing is that I'm wondering is, I'd love to hear more about in this new piece of Through the Night and Living on the Saturday of Despair is the role of music, art, and culture in showing us how we get through, as we're both artists, right. And that's something that sustains us. We've seen that through traditions, how music is like a thing that like sustains us through wading in the water, right? Dealing with catastrophe. Dr. West often talks about catastrophe visited upon us, and blues is like the thing that helps us like communicate that and like sustain us. So I would love to hear the ways that you could possibly incorporate that.
I would say that the blues is going to be there because I remember I was a 14, 15-year-old when I first listened to my first blues song, and I had never heard it. And I was so much taken by that feeling, by that moaning, by that weeping, by that singing, that never samba or any Brazilian music was as important to me as the blues. That kept me through. So I hope it will be there as fundamental part of us to go through this time. Let's, friends, whomever wants to go, please. Thank you so much again. I'm so deeply honored by you. Thank you. Let's hear Larry.